Are you looking for a dessert that you can put on your holiday table without worrying about calories, points, bites, or macros? I have a solution for you here. This is my German apple cake, and it is just 1 bite or blue point for this serving, and I'm going to show you how to do it. Coming up next. Hello and welcome to my kitchen. My name is Roy. I am a home cook and amateur baker, and I am here on this channel sharing recipes that have helped me to lose over 125 pounds, whether those recipes are mine or someone else's. Now today is going to be one of mine. This is another fall treat that you could use on your Thanksgiving table, so I wanted to get that out while we still had some time. So this is going to be my German apple cake. Now, I've seen quite a few videos from German YouTubers who have been doing this cake. They don't give it a name. So I've given it a name. Since they were German YouTubers, and this is an apple cake, it's a German apple cake. And it is pretty quick to come together. It is very full of apple. So you could probably, with Christmas coming up, maybe even make it apple cranberry, maybe even pear cranberry, maybe just pear. So I believe this, I haven't tested those, but I believe this is versatile enough that you could do such things with it. But then I think every recipe is versatile, which is how I come up with most of mine. So let's go over the ingredients real quick. My neck's getting a little twitchy, so if you notice it, just ignore it. I'm going to try to. So we are going to start off with some baking spray. I have my 8-inch cake pan over here. I've already sprayed it. I have some parchment, but we'll be talking about that in a moment. This cake could be a little problematic getting it out of the pan, but I will talk about that later. So I just have some parchment there, just as some insurance. But you should be able to get away with just using cooking spray if you just make sure you spray it well. We have 4 apples here. I already peeled the stickers off, but I believe they were Fuji apples, but I'm not sure. Any type of apple would work fine for this. I have 3/4 cup of flour here, 2 eggs, 1/3 cup of sugar replacement. I will use Swerve, but you can use whatever you want. If it's not a 1-to-1 replacement for sugar, you'll have to adjust because Swerve is a 1-to-1 replacement for sugar. So whatever 1/3 cup would be in whatever sweetener you use is what you would include here. I have 1/4 cup of almond milk at room temperature, and the eggs are also at room temperature, as is the 2 tablespoons of non-fat Greek yogurt, 2 tablespoons of lemon juice, and I just use the bottled most of the time. If it's something that needs the zest, then I will use a real lemon and that juice. But typically, I just use the bottled stuff. I'm not that fancy or that worried about it. And 2 teaspoons of baking powder, not baking soda, 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract, and just a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. You always want a little bit of salt because it enhances the other flavors and gives a little contrast to the sweetness. So, those are the ingredients. We have to prep our apples. I'm going to show you how to do that in just a second. I have the oven preheating to 350 degrees. I have my 8-inch cake pan prepped for the most part, but again, I'll show you that in a bit. Now the next step is to prepare the apples. All you're going to do is peel them and cut them into small pieces. So I'm sure you all know how to peel an apple. And if your apple has a bad spot like mine does right there, I just kind of basically peel it off and let it go from there. I'm not going to throw away a whole apple just for one bad spot. But like I said, you can use any apple. Typically, I like to use Granny Smith when I'm baking, but I was being economical this week and these were on sale. So that's what I went with. So, I'm going to, put my peels into this bowl so they're out of my way. And just going to show you on one apple how I'm prepping it. And then, well, that's a little, okay, that's not just the outside of the apple. Okay, that's not a good one. All right, so what has happened is cutting into one of the apples, there's a lot of brown spots in there. I was saving, I'd gotten these pears because I was going to make a pear cranberry galette, which is kind of like a free-form pie kind of, but that's going to be another video. But I have time to get more pears. I don't have time to get more apples, so I'm going to replace that bad apple with one of the pears. You just have to improvise sometimes. That's just the way it works. And I'm not going to show you how to prep the pear because it's going to be the same as prepping the apples. So sometimes you just have to go with what life throws you, and mine threw me a bad apple, so I'm going to bring in a good pear. I'm sure it will still be fine. I'm still calling it a German apple cake. I'm not going to change the name just because of one replacement item. But you just want to peel your apples and your pear, if you happen to be using a pear. Get this out of here. And then, hopefully, I do not run into the same problem here, but I have another pear if I do. All right, so, now much better. This one is much less of a problem. The other one was like brown specks all through the inside. I'm not going to slice them into too small of a bit. So I'm probably going to do about 1 inch or so. I'll probably cut this and then cut them in half just so they're a little bit smaller. And then throw them in my big bowl over here. Cut this in half here because it's a little thick. And then cut this into sections. Cut in half. So these are a bit smaller, so that way they will cook through much more easily, and all the cake batter, as I'll show you, can get in amongst all of them. So again, cut it. So you get the basic idea. So I'm not going to make you watch this whole process, but I do want to show you that once you've got them cut into the cubes, into your little pieces, you're going to add the lemon juice. And I'm going to add it now just because you don't want the apples to start to brown, and the lemon juice is going to prevent that from happening. And I'm just going to toss this around, and as I add apples, I'll keep tossing it around in the lemon juice to keep them from browning. But I'm going to finish up these apples, and then I will be right back. Okay, so I have my apples and my 1 pear chopped up into little bits, and they have been tossed in the lemon juice. So that way they're not going to turn brown. I can leave them for a little bit and not worry. So that'll give me time to show you how I'm going to prep my pan with the parchment. So let me move this aside for now. And like I said, this is an 8-inch cake pan. You could use a springform pan, which is what you usually make a cheesecake in, because it's got that little buckle on the side that you can open up and pull the sides away from the pan. Now this is an 8-inch cake round of parchment. I also have some 9-inch. It's just convenient to buy them this way, so I can just toss it into a pan and not have to cut them out. But if you have just the sheets or the roll, you can just cut your own out. But I do have these listed on my Amazon store, as well as the parchment sheets. This is a half of one of those that I typically use. So, actually, I forgot my scissors. 1 second. Okay, so I'm just going to take my cake round, and it's already been sprayed inside. So I'm going to take this, tap this in place, but then I'm going to pick it up again and put now the sprayed side, the side with some cooking spray up, and then push this down. So that way I don't have to respray. It gives me a little extra insurance to be able to remove the cake easily. Now this I didn't do the first time, but I'm doing this time just to make things easier, is I'm going to line the edges of the pan with some parchment. If you don't do this, it's fine, but what you're going to have to do is, after the cake has cooled for about 15 minutes, is run a knife along the edge just to make sure it pulls away from the sides. I'm going to use this just to give myself a little extra insurance. So I'm going to fold this bit in half. Like I said, this is just half of one of my big sheets, because when I do something on my quarter sheet pan, my smallest sheet pan, I will usually just cut those in half and use that. So I'm just going to cut this down the length here. And it doesn't have to be overly precise as far as like no all straight lines or anything. So now I'm going to take the parchment and just sit it against the sides, which have been sprayed, so that this parchment will stick. And then just do that around the other edge. And it just about comes to touch it to meet in the middle. There's like a little sliver here and here that isn't covered with parchment, but there's enough parchment covering the majority of it that I'm not that worried about it. Okay, so the cake pan is prepped. I'm going to set this aside and get on with the rest of the ingredients. Be right back. Okay, so we have our 5 wet ingredients. We have the almond milk, the eggs, the yogurt, the vanilla, and yes, the sugar replacement. As I've mentioned in other baking videos, sugar and sugar replacements are often considered wet ingredients because they incorporate and become part of the liquid. Whereas if you incorporated flour into the liquid, it would combine with the liquid, but to become something else. It wouldn't become part of the liquid. It would become more of a doughy substance. So sugar is considered a wet ingredient, so that is going in with all of this. It's going in with our 2 eggs, our 1/4 cup of almond milk, our 2 tablespoons of non-fat Greek yogurt. And again, all of this is at room temperature because it is far easier to combine things when they are all about the same temperature and not cold. Because if you ever tried to combine something that's cold, it likes to hold on to its shape and is more reluctant to mixing together. So just sprinkle my sugar on. And now this is probably the longest part of this whole process. We now have to beat this for about 3 to 4 minutes with our electric mixer, because you want it to double in volume. You want it to get light and fluffy, because what that's going to do is not only help it to rise by getting all those air bubbles in there, but it's also going to be able to mingle in more with the apples. But you'll see what I mean in a moment. So it's going to be about 3 or 4 minutes. I'll probably do a fast forward clip here of me mixing this, but you know what mixing looks like, and I will show you what it looks like once we get ready for it. Okay, I thought I'd stop it here for a moment just to show you where we are now. This has been about 45 seconds to a minute of mixing, and I wanted to just see where this is here, and then I can show you what it looks like when it's more doubled in size, so that what that will look like. I'll be right back. Okay, so I hope you can see now that the mixture has come up to here. It's about doubled in size, much foamier than it was before. So that way it's going to give us a lot of air bubbles to help with this cake rising. But that's not what we're going to rely on solely. We're now bringing in the flour, the baking powder, and the salt. And I'm just going to whisk the 3 of these dry ingredients together just quickly, just to get that all incorporated. And of course, throw some on the counter. That must be my good luck, because anytime I throw it on the counter, it's got to be good luck. Okay, so just a quick toss to get things mingled in there. Then we're going to add this into our egg mixture. And you're just going to mix this up. You don't want to over mix it. You just want to mix it until it comes together, until you don't see any bits of the flour in there. Because if you over mix it, and I've mentioned this before, you can make a tough cake, because what happens is all that mixing is what produces gluten. And so gluten makes things tough, more bread-like than cake-like. And that's why if you've ever made breads or seen anybody making breads, there's a lot of kneading going on, because the more you work that dough, the more you work that flour, the more gluten you're going to form. So in a bread, you want that firm structure. In a cake, you do not. So you just want to mix this together just until it comes together. And there are a few little lumps of flour here that I'm just going to press out. But again, you don't even have to be that too fussy about it, because it will all work out in the end. Okay, so now I'm bringing in the apples. And we are going to pour this all over the apples. And you can see there seems to be way too many apples for this little bit of batter. But what's going to happen is, especially since we beat it to let it really swell up, is it's going to get in between all those apples and bake around those apples. It's going to be delicious. You just wait and see. And I know you might be surprised that there's no spice in here, no cinnamon, no apple pie spice. It really doesn't need it. If you wanted to, you could add a little, but I found it doesn't really need it. It has a really delicious flavor all on its own without any enhancements. So, but it's your call. You do as you'd like to do. That's what cooking's all about. Okay, so I'm going to bring in my cake pan here, and we're going to, hopefully without incident, add in our apple cake mixture. And especially here, you want to make sure that you are getting as much of that batter in here as you can, because it is a very little bit of batter compared to most cakes. So you want to make sure you get every bit in there and let that cook up around the apples. So now just going to smooth this out a little bit and just give it a little shimmy shake. We are going to put this into the 350-degree oven 30 to 40 minutes. The center is going to look firm and dry. This one will be a difficult one to use the toothpick test with because there are so many apples. You might get some moisture just from poking through the apples. But I will show you what it looks like. So 30 to 40 minutes, this is going into the oven, and I'll be back. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, here is our German apple cake, fresh out of the oven. Now we're going to have to let this cool for about 15 minutes. And then what you would do if you didn't have the parchment here, and I'm going to do it anyways, is take the knife and run it between the cake and the pan just to make sure it pulls away. You do not want to do it when it first comes out of the oven because the cake has not set enough. It's not firm enough to do that. You could end up tearing the cake. So what we will do is give this 15 minutes, then we'll run around the edges of the cake with our little knife here, give it another 15 minutes before we take it out of the pan. So it's going to be a half an hour total before we can even remove this from the pan because you want that cake fully set. You don't want to try to turn it out and then it's so hot that everything just falls apart. So we will be back in 15 minutes and run our knife around the edge of the pan. Okay, so it has been 15 minutes, and so to get the cake away from the sides of the pan, if you didn't line it with parchment, you would just run around the sides like this, just to get any parts that are stuck to the walls of the cake pan. And obviously I have the parchment there, so it's not as big of a worry, but I do have those points where there is no parchment. So I definitely want to make sure that I pull it away from there. Now, one thing I did forget to mention is if you wanted to embellish this a little bit more and you had the bites or points for it, you could top this with some slivered almonds, some chopped walnuts, chopped pecans, whatever you feel like. Sprinkle it on the top before you put it into the oven. So that way it'll give it a little extra crunch, a little extra something if you want to. I enjoy it the way it is, but if I had the bites and points and felt like spending them, I would sprinkle maybe some almonds on top or some chopped walnuts. So that is an option, just so you know. So now we're going to give this another 15 minutes to cool down much more. Then we're going to remove it from the pan, so I'll be right back. Okay, so it has been 15 more minutes. Still a bit warm, but we are going to try to get this out without incident. Now, once you take it out, you're going to put it directly onto the cooling rack and let it cool completely before you cut into it. So you can, what I do is I'll use my hand to turn it out, but you could also use a plate. And let me show you how you do that. Just because what you would do is just put the plate on top and then flip it over. I will try it that way and let's see how it works. I felt a shift. And there we have it. So we can get rid of this. And then what I'm going to do is put this on top and carefully flip it. So that way we can take the plate off as well as the parchment paper that was on the outside. Just be careful because it's still warm and it started to rip right here. So that's why you didn't try to take it out of the pan earlier, because when it's hot, it's more likely to fall apart. So we are going to let this cool completely, but let me go over some nutrition facts. Now this will serve 6 to 8 people, depending. The reason I chose the range of 6 to 8 is it's still one bite. I am on the iTrackBites Better Balance plan, which is equivalent to the old WW Blue plan. So hopefully you can figure your personal points based on the Blue plan and what they had as their 0.0 bite foods. But this would be one bite or Blue Point, old Blue Point, if you had 6 or 8 servings out of this. I did calculate the calories and macros for each. So for 6 servings, this would be 150 calories. The macros, fat would be 2 grams, carbs would be 35.2 grams, and the protein would be 4.6 grams, and that's for serving 6. If you're serving 8, then the calories drop to 112 for a serving. The fat goes down to 1.5 grams. The carbs go down to 26.4 grams. And the protein drops to 3.4 grams, and that's for a serving of 8. So you could even do a serving for 4. I haven't calculated that. I would assume it'd probably be 2 bites, 2 Blue Points, which would be incredibly low for a dessert. So you can do as you will. I'm not opposed to eating a quarter of this cake, but that's just me. You do as you want to do. All right, so let me let this cool completely. Then I will come back, cut into it, and move on. Okay, the cake has cooled down. I actually cheated a little bit and threw it in the freezer just so I could get this recorded before I then have to make dinner. My life still goes on even though I'm recording all these things. But I did want to show you a slice, and I am doing 6 servings. So I'm going to just cut this in half. Now, I did calculate for, you could do a dusting of confectioner sugar, like actual confectioner sugar, because some people, like Paul, don't like the taste of the sweeteners if they're not cooked in something or baked in something. So if you were doing this as a serving of 6, because you can get away with 3/4 of a teaspoon of confectioner sugar for 0 bites. And you know me, I'm going for as few bites or points as possible. If you're doing a serving of 6, you could sprinkle 4.5 teaspoons of confectioner sugar on top without affecting the bites or points. If you're doing a serving of 8, you can actually do 2 tablespoons of confectioner sugar, which is 6 teaspoons, so it's not that much more really. Because you have 2 other servings, which would be 3/4 of a teaspoon each. So anyway, long story short, if you wanted to, you could also do a dusting of confectioner sugar without affecting the bites on here or points. Now the bad thing about doing 6 is trying to get these angles correct for serving. And because this is so full of apple and very moist, you definitely want to hold on to the edges while you're cutting. But let's see if we can get this out of there. And there you go. There is 1/6 of the cake right there. And it's really, really good. Very full of fruit, which is partly why it's so low in bites or points. And it would be great on your Thanksgiving table. Now, as you know, one of my apples was bad, so I had to throw pear in there. So if you have to improvise, improvise. Don't feel that you're stuck to the way the recipe is written. Just do what you have to do. Now, this recipe, as well as all of my recipes, can be found on my blog. This one will probably be towards the top, but if you scroll through, you'll find all the earlier recipes, and there may be other things out there, like my apple crumble cake, which is another great apple cake recipe. But you can go over to the blog and search all of that. So I hope that you liked this video, and if you did, please give me a thumbs up. I would really appreciate that. And subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet and you are looking for recipes that can help you on a weight loss journey. Share this recipe if you think there's someone out there that you know who might be interested in something like this. And hit that notification bell for the next time I upload any sort of video. I did finish my Back to Basics series, but there will periodically be things that come up like that. So just hit the notification bell so that when it does pop up there, you're alerted. And also comment down below if you like this cake, if you've seen the original recipe that I based this on in those short little YouTube clips from those German bakers. They definitely have something here. They have other recipes that I want to play around with too, so there will be more coming. It's just, you know, I'm trying to get the Thanksgiving and then Christmas things out, and then I'll have more free reign to do whatever I feel like. You can also follow me over on social media. Here is my Instagram handle, and there are 2 Facebook groups that I am a part of. One is mine, Recipes with Roy, and the other one is Finding Our Way, W-E-I-G-H. And that one I co-admin with Jennifer Lynn from the Jennifer Lynn channel, as well as Bree Coleman from Balancing Life with Bree. So join us over in those groups. There's a lot of great people with tips, tricks, support, what have you. So I'm going to go make dinner now because I definitely want to get to this cake after I've eaten dinner. So until next time, bye.